In this video, I'm going to talk you through how to stitch the mistletoe design, which is a limited edition design that's going to be part of our Year of Flowers collection. So, in this kit, what you're going to find is first up, you'll have a piece of fabric printed with the design, and on that you've got two needles, a large eye and a small eye needle. Now this is purely about the preference for how you want to stitch. If you prefer working with a needle that's easier to thread, then I recommend doing the entire thing with the large eye needle. But some people have a preference for a smaller needle, so you can use that one. Then you have a hoop in your kit, as well as a guide on how to use it. You've got this little book of stitches, and in this book of stitches, it covers lots of different stitches you're going to use throughout all the Botanicals range. So there's stitches in here that aren't being used as part of the mistletoe, but may be used as part of other designs in the range. You then have all your threads, which are on bobbins and numbered up, and these correspond to the stitch plan. So on the stitch plan, you've got a couple of really high-res photos of the embroidery design, so you can see what you're going to be stitching. And then on the reverse, you have a guide of what stitch to use where. Now this is a really simple design, and throughout it, I just use satin stitch. This is an amazing way of building your knowledge of satin stitch. So you can see all the leaves here are stitched in colours 1 and 2. And they're done in this order so you can match up where the fabric is printed here to where it's printed on the design plan, and then you do that colour in that area. Now, of course, with a design like this, if you do it slightly wrong, no one will ever know. For the berries of the mistletoe, you've got a choice. Now, in my design, I've used just a satin stitch for the berries, as you can see here. But if you want to, and you fancy more of a challenge, then you can use French knots for the berries of the mistletoe. Now, there's a separate video on French knots, so you can go and refer to that if you do choose to use that. The only other stitch you're going to use is a back stitch, and you back stitch over the top of all the letters to create the wording on the design. So let's get stuck in. So first up, I'm going to take my hoop, place it onto my fabric. I'm just going to start up in the top left. It doesn't matter where you choose to start on the design, and make sure when you put your hoop on, you put it on nice and tight so the fabric is taut. As you can see is here, the fabric is taut. Then I'm going to refer to my stitch plan. So I can see that I'm doing this section in satin stitch, and I'm going to start with these top leaves, which I know are done in colour number 2. Now, throughout all the Botanicals range, as you'll see in your stitch guide, in this getting started section, we stitch everything with 3 strands of thread. So let me show you how I split the thread. So first, I'm just going to unwind an arm's length of thread. Then bring the thread up here, and all I do is find the ends of the thread like this, and I pull one at a time. You see, I'm pulling away. Now, don't try pull more than one at a time, because if you do that, then inevitably what happens is you find you get in a tangle. So I'm just going to keep pulling until I've got 3 strands. So I've got my 3 stitching strands here, like these 3 strands. I'm going to take the remaining 3 and wind them back onto the bobbin. Those ones will come back to you later. So I've got my 3. I'm going to work with my large eye needle, and I thread these through the needle. Then I just tie a knot in the end and I've then got my stitching length and I'm ready to go. So for this video, I'm going to mount up my mistletoe just onto a hoop stand. And this is just so it stays in place whilst we're filming, but I wouldn't use one of these at home. So to start the satin stitch, it is so simple. All I'm going to do is start a random position along the leaf. Now I always find it easiest to start in the middle of a leaf rather than at the end. So I bring my needle up to the front, I'm going to take it down to the other side, and I do this same method. So the thing with the satin stitch is you always work in this looping manner, where if you start on the top and you go down to the bottom, you then always bring your needle back up to where you begin. And the way you can tell you're doing a satin stitch right is that the front will look exactly the same as the back. Now, as you can see, I'm working across the horizontal direction of the leaf. So I'm working in the shortest possible direction. I could do my stitches that way, but if I did them that way, I'd have fewer stitches in order to create the shape. So I'm doing them this side to that side. Now, as you stitch, satin stitch can be a hard stitch to get neat. So don't worry too much if at first you feel like it's a bit messy. When you're doing satin stitch, you can jump around all over the place. So I could jump down to here, keep going, doing a bit here, and then say if I spot I've got a gap earlier along, maybe I think there's a gap in that section, I can always go back into the gap and add another stitch in. So know that you can always stitch over any gaps you've found. Don't ever unpick, just instead stitch over the top of any stitches you're not super pleased with. And one really important thing to bear in mind is that the printing on this design is permanent. So you want to make sure as you stitch, as you can see I'm doing here, I'm moving my needle beyond where the lines are marked. So I'm making sure that I'm covering over all that white ink because I don't want that appearing once I finish. I don't want to see any of those white lines. So I'm just working down the leaf. And as I get down towards this end, I, from this position, can really choose anywhere to go. You know, I could come up to here and start working on this leaf, but what I want to show you quickly is just this bit of stem. Now the stems are drawn as a narrow line, but don't try to make your stitches as narrow as that. That is for use as a guide for your stitches, not for the width you want them to be. So you can see I'm going to go along this line and stitch side to side down the line, but I'm doing wider stitches than the line. So I'm keeping it relatively wide. And you can see that exactly on this demo piece. So you can see how wide some of these stitches are down the stems. So I'm using it in a wide way. Now, as you can see on mine here, you'll see I've got quite a few areas where there's little bits of gaps. I've got areas where it's slightly messy down here, but I'm not worried about that because when you look at it all from a distance, then you'll find that actually the whole thing looks incredibly neat. So don't get too perfectionist about this as you go. So all I do is I'm going to keep going like that. Now that is how I stitch the entire mistletoe design. Whether I'm working down the leaves or whether I'm working these berries, the berries are just going to be a similar stitch side to side. Now you don't have to work one colour all at once. And whenever you finish a strand of thread, so say once you've got to about 5 centimetres left of the thread you're using, all you're going to do is turn over, and to secure your thread, you run your needle under the back of a few stitches. As you can see, done there. So that's all you do to secure your thread, because once you finish, you'll mount up the design, and so it will all neaten up then. So I cut off my thread, and I'm going to keep going like that. Now the one bit I do want to show you is just how to overstitch the lettering. So I'm going to get the colour number 4, which is the colour we use for the letters. I'm going to do exactly the same, where I cut myself an arm's length. Now here, I separate the strands of thread again, so pull them out. There we go. So 1, 2, 3. So I've got my 3 here, and I'm going to take my other 3 and wind them back onto the bobbin. Then working with these ones, I'm going to thread the needle up. tie a knot, and then we're going to go in to do a back stitch. So for a back stitch, all I want to do is start at the end of the letter, and I basically stitch along the line. So I do a short little stitch like this along the line, and then I jump forward into a gap, and then I come back to where my last stitch ended. So again, sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It is as simple as that. The main thing is you want to have no gaps between your stitches. You can make your stitches very short, you can make your stitches very long. In an ideal world, what you do is you have consistency. So you see from that end, I'm going to go back. And come back down. 1 step back. And then I'm just going to jump up to this next bit of the letters. And do bear that in mind with all embroidery, you can just jump around the piece. Don't be worried about things like needing to finish threads off or secure threads on the back and not jumping between areas. This is a dark fabric and you won't see any trailing threads in the background. So that's as simple as it is. You then are going to follow all the letters round until you end up with the mistletoe. Let me stitch around here. And that's it. That is as simple as your mistletoe design is. For all those doing the Year of Flowers, this is the way we wanted to ease you into the Year of Flowers by giving you a design that's really simple, uses 1 stitch throughout, so you get super comfortable with a satin stitch. Now, as you go, if you're finding it not looking as neat as you wanted to, really don't worry. You can always go back at the end and fill in any gaps, but the key thing is keep going. I really hope you enjoy this design and can't wait to get you started on all the other Botanicals kits coming your way.